Hi, welcome everyone. So today we've got Charlotte Brookfield from Cardiff University, who's a senior lecturer there in the School of Social Sciences, to talk about teaching Microsoft Excel and using it for social research. So Charlotte's currently co-director of the Cardiff Q-Step Centre and has spent a great deal of time researching how to teach quantitative methods well. So thank you, Charlotte, for coming to talk to us today.
Thank you, Adrian, and thank you for that lovely introduction and the invitation to speak this afternoon. So as Adrian mentioned, I'm Charlotte, and I'm going to speak to you through about 30 to 40 minutes on my experiences of using Microsoft Excel in teaching social science students broadly. Just go on to my next slide. Oh, actually, what I was going to say, a little bit of a plug right at the beginning. So up on the slide there, you will see that this is the book that I wrote and was published back in 2021, which is called Using Microsoft Excel for Social Research. So a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about today are in this book, and I will also highlight some of the features that I think will be particularly useful for those of you that are hoping to incorporate Microsoft Excel into your teaching going forward a little bit later in the presentation. So as a bit of an outline then, I'm going to begin by telling you a little bit about myself. Adrian did give me a lovely introduction there, but I'm going to add a few more details in, which will hopefully give you a bit of an idea about how and why I started becoming interested in using Microsoft Excel in my teaching. I'm then going to tell you a few stories. So I'm going to tell you about a few incidences and things that have happened during my career that really made me think it was important to introduce Microsoft Excel within the curriculum in the School of Social Sciences at Cardiff University. And I'll summarize those key findings or stories then in a few slides where I talk about why to use Microsoft Excel. I will outline some of the challenges that I've also encountered with teaching Microsoft Excel to social science students. And as promised, we'll signpost you towards some resources that I have found useful as well. As I said, I'm going to talk for about half an hour, 40 minutes. But if you do have any questions as we go along, please feel free to pop them into the chat, because I know what it's like. Sometimes you forget them when we get to the end. And if I don't spot them straight away, we will come to them at the Q&A part towards the end. Okay, so as I said, I'm going to start a little bit by talking about me to give you a bit of background and contextual information. So as Adrian mentioned, I work in the School of Social Sciences at Cardiff University. And this is a large interdisciplinary school. We've got approximately 300 undergraduate students per year group, so 300 in year one, 300 in year two, and so on. And I say this because I actually deliver the compulsory core quantitative research methods training within the school to our year two students. So we've got a lot of students from various different programs studying that module. And during their autumn semester, they learn about descriptive statistics, bivariate analysis, including cross tabulations, chi-square statistic. They do t-tests and the non-parametric equivalents. They also look at correlation and a very basic introduction to linear regression. And they have traditionally used SPSS to analyze existing data sets from the UK Data Service to enhance their ability to do data analysis and to interpret real life data. I also then lead on our undergraduate dissertation module, which again is a very popular module among our students in the school. We have about 150 students each year take this module, and I very much lead and support those students that are doing quantitative research projects as part of that final year independent project. And then as well as that, and where I think a lot of the case studies are going to come from that I'm going to talk to you about this afternoon, I lead a module called Real World Research. So this is a second year module which falls in the spring semester, and it provides our undergraduate students the opportunity to go out to a local organisation and put into practice their quantitative research method skills that they have developed. So we have lots of students going on placements with different local charities, for example, also with education providers, so like Cardiff and Vale College, for example, with qualification bodies as well. So Agorad Cymru is another example, as well as you'll see later on, internal departments within the university. So as Adrian mentioned, I'm also the co-director for the Q-STEP Centre at Cardiff University. And you may have heard Adrian and I speaking very briefly about Q-STEP at the start of this call as well. So for those of you that are not familiar, Q-STEP was a project that was initiated by the British Academy, the Economic Social Research Council and the Nuffield Foundation back in 2011, where they were really concerned about the deficit of quantitative researchers and social science students that were interested in quantitative methods. And so they decided that we needed to have a more radical change to the training of quantitative research methods in the social sciences. And they gave out pots of funding to different institutions to try out different initiatives to engage these students. So Cardiff University was fortunate enough to be one of these institutions, and we've introduced a new degree programme called the Social Analytics degree programme. And we've also done various other little things and projects and initiatives with other higher education institutions to try and help upskill them. But also, and quite importantly, some of the work I've led on has been with local schools and colleges to help both the lecturers and teachers in those institutions, but also the young people studying there. And again, I'm going to draw on some of that work in this presentation. So as I said, I wanted to start with a few different case studies. So these are just some of the organisations that our students that go out on placement have worked with. So we've got Welsh Government there, Wales Wheelchair Basketball Association, Cardiff University, the admissions team, and Cardiff University Marketing and Communication. So I'm going to start with the story of Welsh Government. So we had the opportunity to send our students on placement with Welsh Government, and we thought this was a really fantastic, prestigious opportunity for our students to engage with. Now, because of the security procedures for going into the Welsh Government buildings, these students were told that they were not allowed to take their own laptops into the building and that they would be using Welsh Government devices for their projects for the duration of their placements. Now, what happened is that these students went into Welsh Government and they sat down, they felt fairly confident about doing their projects, they thought they knew what they were doing. And then it came to light that they wouldn't be able to use SPSS, which is what they'd been trained to use during their autumn semester. And in fact, they were expected to do their data analysis using Microsoft Excel, as were all the junior social researchers and social statisticians in Welsh Government. And what they learned very quickly, and what I learned very quickly, is actually that just the most senior social researchers in Welsh Government have access to expensive licenses for SPSS and Stata and so on. So our students very quickly had to try and transform their learning from SPSS into Microsoft Excel. And the added layer of complication being in this instance was that those students would often encounter issues during the day when they were out on placement, but then couldn't show me to help troubleshoot those issues because of the security. So I'd be sat over the road, literally our school faces the Welsh Government building, so I could almost wave to them from one window to another, but I wouldn't be able to go and help troubleshoot in that way. And so it would be when they were coming back to the classroom, really reliant upon them having recorded the error messages that they encountered very carefully, and also in some instances trying to replicate the issues ourselves to work them out. So that became sort of, to me, the first sign that perhaps we do need to be incorporating Microsoft Excel in our teaching and in our curriculum. And then we had a student that went on placement with the Wales Wheelchair Basketball Association. And similarly to Welsh Government, again, licenses to SPSS were not going to be an option in such a small organisation that is charity essentially. So what this student was asked to do was actually to create a map of where all of the players for wheelchair basketball lived in Wales, and also of all the different training grounds for wheelchair basketball. And what we quickly learned is that actually the student could perhaps think about using different software packages like QGIS, but we weren't teaching those in our institution at the time. We weren't teaching them as part of our core curriculum. And so what we did is when we had a little bit of an explore, we realized that Microsoft had some fantastic add-ins to make some really interactive and engaging maps to show this information. And so again, that kind of added to my feeling that perhaps this is a really powerful tool that we should be teaching our students as part of their curriculum. We had a similar problem when a student was working internally with our admissions team. So again, they wanted to create a map showing where people had come from to visit our open days, and also to then create a map of where our applicants came from, to see if there was a bit of a mismatch there. And then finally, where our successful applicants came from, so that they could see whether perhaps they needed to be running some more local admissions and open day events in schools and colleges across the UK. And then finally, the last example I want to share with you here is another Cardiff University placement opportunity which one of our students had, which was with the marketing and communication team. And for this project, the student actually was using a variety of different data sets. So they were using UCAS data that had been given to them on admissions. They were also looking at data from the Higher Education Statistical Agency, as well as looking at internal data sets we've got on student records, and also exit data, so destination of leavers data. And we worked out that by the time the student would have converted all of these data files into SPSS files, that would have probably taken a good day of their placement away from them. And when it's only a short-term placement, that time is really, really valuable. So again, underscoring that necessity to upskill and retrain some of our students. And it's not just me that's found this. So Jackie Carter and colleagues at Manchester University, in their paper that was published in 2017, said what we have found is that for many, especially smaller organisations, these packages may not be available, with much more use made of tools like Excel, Google Forms, and in some cases, open source tools like R. This came to light when we consulted with host internship organisations, when we asked for key skills and software tools they would look for. They unanimously asked for Excel, with a lower number requesting SPSS. So I think this really highlights the situation that I have outlined on the previous slide. But unlike Jackie here, who's highlighted smaller organisations, but actually what we found is that this was the case even with those larger organisations like Cardiff University and with the Welsh Government. So I've then got some other case studies here that I just want to briefly reflect on. So we are really fortunate at the Q-STEP Centre that our students have become recognised as having these advanced quantitative research method skills. And quite often we get invited to work collaboratively on projects with external organisations as one-offs. So we had a project that was really, really successful with the Hair and Beauty Council, which got launched at Westminster back in 2019. But this project is a more recent one that I've put up here, which was from the Crown Commercial Services. And actually what they wanted is that their HR department had information on who received recognition awards. And they had this broken down by different demographic variables, for example, seniority. And they wanted to create a system that would allow them to see the number of people at different grades, for instance, that received these recognition awards or who didn't receive these recognition awards, and then have something pop up to tell them whether there was a statistically significant difference or not. And actually, they didn't even want it to say statistically significant or not. They wanted it to be color-coded. So this was something they wanted to create for people working in HR, so not statisticians or people necessarily interested in data. It was going to be something that could be automated and used again and again. And so here we felt that Excel was a really good option for this project, because it would only require the HR people or colleagues to put the numbers in, and then they would automatically be able to get the red or green flag based on what the results of the analysis showed. And then similarly, as a Q-STEP Centre, we have hosted over the years a number of different students undertaking Nuffield projects. So Nuffield projects are opportunities for those that are aged 16 to 18, usually first generation university potential applicants, to come along and see what it's like to do a degree programme which is broadly related to STEM, so science, technology, engineering and mathematics. So we've offered these opportunities out to young people over several years now. And what we discovered is actually at the start of the pandemic, we wanted to still be able to give these young people these opportunities. We didn't want to have to stop giving them this enriching experience just because they weren't able to be with us in person. So a lot of the resources that we'd previously used with these young people required them to analyze data using SPSS, because the expectation was that they were in our building, they were using our computers, and so had access to this software. And all of a sudden we had to rethink that. So again, that was an opportunity for us to think about using Excel, and we created some really fantastic resources to help those students along the way. And I mentioned as well about outreach and engagement work. So we get, as a QSTEP Centre, lots of expressions of interest from local schools and colleges to help support students studying the extended project qualification. So this is something that sits alongside their A-levels, where they can actually undertake a piece of independent research and they then write a report about that piece of research. And similarly, within the Welsh context, we actually also get a lot of requests to help support students doing the Welsh Baccalaureate, where again, they are required to do a piece of independent research. And so again, I realized through doing this work and through having these conversations with teachers and lecturers in these local institutions, that a lot of students were actually coming to university with some familiarity of using Excel because of these various different qualifications that they have to do. So it seemed to me that perhaps Excel was a good starting point when teaching quantitative research methods to a cohort that we know are traditionally quite anxious about approaching this learning, because they've got that level of familiarity, at least with what's on the screen, compared to other statistical software packages that are out there. So to summarize then, I think that this led me to kind of come up with 3 reasons for why I wanted to introduce Microsoft Excel into the curriculum in the School of Social Sciences. And this was to do with the familiar interface and ease of use, flexibility and functionality, and also importantly to do with employability. So what I've done as a result of this information that I've got is actually our real world research module now. Our students have 2 workshops prior to going out on placement, where they translate their learning from their autumn semester quantitative research methods module into Excel. So they have an opportunity to recap all of that knowledge, but also learn how to use Excel. And on top of that, what I've actually also done is for the seminar resources for the compulsory quantitative research methods module, whilst we are still using SPSS, I've given the students instructions on how to do all of those tasks in Excel. So I hope that there are 1 or 2 curious students that go and have a little bit of a play around. But even if there's not, even if they're just put to one side those resources, I do think that they will be useful for them when they go out into the workplace. And I'm trying to encourage our students not to be reliant on one platform, because the main thing I've learned from this experience has been that when you go out into the workplace, you're actually expected to be somewhat pluralistic and flexible to all these different software options out there. So just to kind of go through these again and really hammer the point home, I guess. So familiar interface and ease of use. So I think for a lot of our students, they are at least familiar with Microsoft Office products. So even if they haven't used Excel extensively, they will know, for instance, when they open an Excel workbook, how to save it, because it will be the same as what they've done in Word and in PowerPoint on previous occasions. And so I hope that this level of familiarity, along with particularly those that have used Excel at school or college, helps reduce that anxiety when they are approaching this learning, which for some, we know that this quantitative methods learning can induce anxiety, stress, and concern. So that level of familiarity, I think, will help with those feelings, and could mean that actually this is a preferable option to using something like SPSS or Stata, where they don't know quite where to click to do anything at that stage. They already know something with Microsoft Excel. Another real bonus for Microsoft Excel is the fact that it can be so easily integrated with other Microsoft Office products. So if students are creating presentations or writing reports, they can copy and paste across any visualizations, for example, that they make very easily and they integrate really nicely. We've had a number of dissertations, for example, in the past, where students have tried to copy and paste lots of output from SPSS, and often the SPSS tables produce some redundant information that doesn't really need to be there. And then they've ended up kind of making all these little pixelated tables that are the wrong way round or all over the place because it just doesn't transfer across. Whereas with Excel, that is a lot easier to copy across, but also I would say the amount of output that students receive is a lot less than it is with other statistical software packages. And again, for learners, this can help reduce those feelings of anxiety because they're looking at less information. And actually, if they've got a textbook that's accompanying their learning, they know that they are just looking for that one statistic and that's all that's there. There's not all this other information that they don't need to worry about. So it helps them discern those key messages a little bit quicker. So flexibility and functionality then. So for those that are new to quantitative research methods and quantitative analysis, Microsoft Excel does allow students to use a menu-driven option to analyze data, which is through the data analysis tool pack. And I'm going to very quickly demo how to install the data analysis tool pack in a second. But then it does also allow students to use formulae. So for those that you think really can be challenged a little bit more, or you perhaps want to introduce to them the idea of syntax and coding, this could be a really good way to go. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this when I come on to the challenges of Microsoft Excel. But ultimately, Microsoft Excel obviously isn't a statistical software package. It is a spreadsheet package. But this has its advantages in that it can be used at various stages of the research process. So one of the real benefits that I found is actually getting students to use Excel to create Gantt charts at the starts of their projects, because again, it helps relieve that anxiety that this is a really scary package that they've not used before. It introduces it in a really friendly way. So the fact that it can be used throughout the whole research project is a plus in my eyes. And again, I've mentioned this already, but the fact that you've got these add-ins to create some fantastic infographics as well as interactive maps is really good for students that are expected to do presentations or research posters. And then I think the employability point I've stressed quite extensively already, but obviously my experience has been, as has others, for instance, with that Jackie Carter quote, that Microsoft Excel is being used widely by employers and organizations because it is a more cost-effective option. And therefore, it is perhaps crucial for our students to be learning about how to use Excel. So I said I'd show you just very quickly the data analysis tool pack. So you may notice that in my version of Excel that I've put on the slide here, under the data tab, I have this option for data analysis. And this then opens up the window that you can see on the screen there. And you can see that this allows students to do some quite complex statistical analysis more quickly and easily. So we've got things in there. They've got the descriptive statistics, but there's also ANOVAs in there. Correlation and regression is also in there as well. So again, for those that are kind of just getting to the point where they're recognizing the names of the tests they need to use, this can be a really good way to start. It's not like with SPSS where you have to go to various different menus to do different tests. They're all under that data analysis block. So again, makes it a little bit more easy for our students. So for those that want to install the data analysis toolpack, I'm going to just very quickly say how to do it, but I appreciate that this might be something you want to come back to in the Q&A, or I can signpost you to resources showing you how to do it. So if you did want to install the data analysis tool pack, you just go to File in the top left corner and then select Options. Once you've done that, it will open up this new window that you can see on the screen here. And from the left-hand menu, you choose the option Add-ins, which is towards the bottom. Once you're there, at the bottom of the screen here, you can see we've got Manage and Excel Add-ins. And you just need to click Go on that one. And that should open then a new window. And once this new window is open, you need to just make sure you select the Analysis Tool Pack option and click OK. And once you've done that, you should notice that when you click on this data tab, you've got this new option open here. Now I'm going to caveat that as soon as I go into challenges now. So going on to challenges of using Microsoft Excel in teaching social science students. So the first challenge, and what I said was going to be my caveat to installing the data analysis tool pack there, is that I'm a Windows user. And the first time that I decided to teach this to students, I realized that the buttons aren't in the same place on a Mac. So that was a bit of a learning curve for me. So I think just to be aware that there are differences in how Excel looks between Windows computers and Apple products. And if you can, which is what I managed to do, I managed to get a little bit of funding to have a student work with me over a summer period on an internship to go through how to do the various different tests on a Mac is really important as well. I mentioned this already, but obviously Excel is not a statistical software package necessarily. It is a spreadsheet tool. So there is a limit with how big the data sets can get that you can have in there. So there are a certain number of items and observations you can have, although I would say it is very large. And the chances of your undergraduate students working with data that is that big is very unlikely, I would say. And there are ways around it. So we had a student who was on placement fairly recently within the university, again, actually, who managed to link several Microsoft Excel data sets together behind the scenes, but that did take a lot of work to happen. I think things like recoding and transforming variables can be a little bit harder on Excel than they are in things like SPSS. So you have to do a lot more work for yourself. There's not a clear page where you click and you can create a new variable. And similarly, because there's no output window, there's no syntax or coding that will summarize what you've done. So you need to make sure that yourself or your students are keeping really clear records if they are recoding variables. And again, being really organized with the output. So a lot of students just have a little bit of a play around with Excel and then find that they've put some output on a new page, some is in a new workbook, some is at the bottom of the data set. So it's not all clearly in one place. So just again, trying to take a bit of a logical approach to organizing that information is a bit of a challenge that you may encounter. And then finally, I put there social science resources. So there's a lot of resources out there, but quite often they seem to be aimed more at business and management students rather than at social science students. So it's finding those relevant resources can be a little bit problematic, which is why we go on to resources next. So as I mentioned at the start, I've written a book about using Microsoft Excel for social research. It is aimed primarily at students. So the book goes through the research process. So each chapter follows a different stage of the research process. It starts off with, for instance, creating Gantt charts to help organize a research project, and then goes on to look at things like familiarizing yourself with a data set, so exploring and looking for missing data. And then some univariate analysis and some bivariate analysis, as well as some information on creating graphs, charts, those interactive maps, and so on for presentations or written thesis and so on. Each chapter uses an open source teaching data set, so the students can actually replicate the analysis as they read the book, and there are some activities at the end of each chapter, as well as teaching ideas. There are some online resources to accompany the book. So the video tutorials are there. Anybody can access them at any point. So those might be really useful for troubleshooting as well, if you've got a student out on placement, for example. And alongside the book, there is also PowerPoint slides and a test bank of questions. But there were also some other really fantastic resources out there that I just want to very quickly highlight. So the first up here is from Sheffield University, and this is from their Maths and Statistics Help MASH resources. So they've got some really excellent videos on using Excel to do various different things. And they also have some shortcut documents there as well, which could be quite helpful for some of you. They also do have some really good resources on SPSS and R. So for those of you teaching using those software packages as well, it may be worth having a look at them. The Khan Academy. So I often recommend the Khan Academy when I'm talking about teaching quantitative research methods more generally. I have found that their resources are really good for helping recap some of the more basic information that sometimes our students forget or get confused about, particularly if they've had a gap in their maths learning. So things like rounding, sometimes they struggle a little bit with if they've had a break in their maths learning, or they're fearful of number. And there's some really great resources on the Khan Academy. But the Khan Academy do also have some things that are are particular to Microsoft Excel. So for example, they've got a question and a video about the distribution of data, and they use Excel to create a histogram there. So there's some information there that may be useful, or resources for teaching. And then finally, I've actually put a link to the 5th edition of Alan Bryman's social research methods here. So weirdly, I actually wrote the online resources for the 6th edition of Alan Bryman's social research methods book, but they aren't open access. So the 5th edition ones are available online, and you can see some exercises that you can work through with your students on Microsoft Excel and using it for analysis. Or if you want to buy the 6th edition, you can work through the resources that I created to go alongside that newer version of the book. So that was all I was going to talk about for this afternoon. I've popped my email address on there as well, because I know what it's like. Sometimes you think of things after the event. So do feel free to drop me an email if you have thought of anything at a later date. But I think we'll open it up for questions now, if that's okay, Adrian.